Good morning. Greetings, my brothers and sisters. One love, one heart, one destiny. So, we're going to talk about how we can bounce back by breaking barriers and can we develop an integrated systems therapy and service delivery for struggling youth in Jamaica. So, we live in a monetary, military, missionary, and materialistic system. The power gradient depends upon amount of money you possess that can buy many things. Military or militia or militants you can command. Missionary, the position you occupy and pursues the power you have in religious establishment. And materialistic, the property and stuff you own. These components of the system constantly influence and interact with each other. The pursuit, preservation, and enforcement of these sources of social power greatly impacts society in myriad ways. Unfortunately, the influence extends to how we see and relate to our family, friends, classmates, colleagues, community, and other human beings through this faulty prism of power endorsed by this dehumanizing system. So let's look at how we can break this systemic barrier. The monetary system, which influences youth to review as if everything is for sale and commodifies everything, including relationships. And a second farmer who was in trouble for showing off the money he made out of selling weed in the school. We are having a discussion about slavery. It was a week of Emancipation Day, and he said during the discussion that it's brilliant. Slavery has been reinvented in the form of monetary system. And I asked him, how is that? And he said, in the days gone by, the folks, slave masters, would go to Africa or elsewhere and give something to somebody who will catch others and hand it over to them as slaves. They'll bring them to Jamaica, for example, and have the mother working in town send the father to Montego Bay to get other ladies there pregnant to create more mini slaves and send the child to Clarendon to work in the plantation. But now they don't have to do that. All they have to do is flash some money. Look what happened to me. My father has gone to Florida to make some money, and in the process, he has found a next woman, and my parents broke up, and my mother has to work two jobs, and by the time she comes home, she's tired and bored, and by the time I finish my homework and everything after a long day of school, I'm tired, I'm bored. So she goes on to watch a soap opera on TV, and I'm busy on my laptop, TikToking, Facebooking, Instagramming, and such. So they don't have to split the family and send them everywhere with force. They can even have them in the same house, like me and my mother, and disconnect them from each other using technology. Brilliant. I said to him, this explanation is very brilliant. And we have military system. We know what is happening globally and in Gaza recently. And we have Jamaican Defense Force and Don's Defense Force at war with each other, and innocent people getting caught between and getting killed and traumatized. And we have a materialistic system which says what you possess is more important than who you are, what you drive is more important than what drives you, who is What is on you is more important than what is in you. And also, we have a missionary system where people masquerading as people of church uh, exploit the gullible and enrich themselves. Although we have many churches doing some wonderful work with the disempowered and poor. And I even wonder what would have happened if all people in Gaza were Jews or everyone in Israel were Muslims. So many killed, so many children would have not been killed and maimed. We have a social system which gets you addicted to drugs, alcohol, social media, video games, keep you ignorant about how relationship works, and the sexualized society compels you to have intimate relations when they are not ready and forces them to have children, although they're children themselves. And we have legacy of baby fathers and baby mothers to boot. And media doesn't help, although it's a great source of information. It's also source of false information and fear. We have education system which make children feel that they are only as good as their grades and their future is only as bright as their grades, which stress them out with long, boring classes, heavy load of homework, kills their creativity, and encourages them to succumb to job slavery, preparing for the past, not for the future. And what are the domestic barriers now? We have a private, which is endemic, superimposed by COVID. Private is crime and violence disorder. Don't have to say more. Poor parenting practices where corporal punishment is endorsed by culture. Children need to be seen, not heard, or not even seen. And there's traumatization at home, at schools and communities, so child has nowhere to run or hide. And we have poverty. 1 out of 4 children live in poverty, and poverty comes with exposure to difficult situations, hunger, as well as increased risk of exposure to crime and violence and abuse. As you can see, in one study, 1 out of 5 children were involved in violence, and many experienced all kind of abuse. 1 out of 20 were stabbed or shot at least once. 1 out of 16 were carrying a weapon to school. And there are risks of violence as well as behavioral problems and academic backwardness. They are also at risk at depression and substance abuse. And we have legacy of plenty baby mothers and many baby fathers. And teenage pregnancy is unfortunately rampant. Many young people struggle whether I'm white enough, black enough, fat enough, thin enough, who I am, who wants me, where do I belong? Am I sexy enough or Christian enough? Who are the leaders should I trust and where are my role models? And the virtual world leads to deluge, distraction, dementia, deduction, and depression, isolation, and addiction. Exposure to adverse childhood experience. And in one recent studies, Dr. Gale warns us cases of Jamaican boys and the education crisis. Do we save them and save ourselves? And we forget that we're all humans until race disconnected us, religion separated us, politics divided us, and wealth classified us. This whole old game of divide and rule instead of support and empower. But who might tell who is going to bell the cat? Cat will kill us. And when we distill different predisposing, precipitating, and perpetuating factors, which fuel a lot of problems in this society, whether it's crime and violence, drug abuse, teenage pregnancy, and such. Poor parenting skills, poor psychosocial support to those parents, adverse childhood experiences and trauma, unidentified and untreated mental disorders in youth stand out. And they not only risk emotional and social problems, but also put you at risk for increased occurrence of illnesses like cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and such. And COVID-19 has only made it worse. These four factors actually correlate closely to the factors predisposing children to violence according to the National Plan of Action Against Child Violence. So the solution should be appropriate and proportionate. Positive parenting for poor parenting skills, psychosocial support for poor psychosocial support, trauma-informed management for ACEs and trauma, and early identification of treatment for unidentified and untreated mental disorders. And we can't do it alone, and we have to partner with appropriate agencies from different ministries as well as NGOs who are on the ground doing some wonderful work, as well as community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and service clubs as such. And till 2010, working in the two child guidance clinics in KSA, as well as other child guidance clinics in the region, along with 5 magnificent mental health clinicians, treating about 1,000 children and adolescents per year with a target population of 30,000 children and adolescents in Kingston St. Andrew alone, diagnosing them with ADHD, conduct disorder, learning disorder, PTSD, operational defiant disorder, knowing that they might predispose them to aggression, agitation, some of them to even to life of crime and violence, appreciating that best way to help at-risk children is not in isolated doctor and parent treatment rooms, but with community-based system of care that incorporates an interagency integration of services based on client-centered and family-empowering orientation. And then we is to appreciate that there are many more out there than 1,000 we treat, which is less than 3%. And knowing that out of 160,000 children who may have mental disorders in Jamaica, 40,000 may meet full criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, and many others suffer from varying degrees of post-traumatic stress, knowing fully well that 1 out of 5 adolescents were either a victim or perpetrator of violence, and also knowing that more than 30% inner city primary school children had symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Then, knowing that best way is to work through the schools and community, not just in the clinic alone. And in May 2010, the security force operation in West Kingston resulted in over 70 casualties and over 200 children and adolescents who were screened positive for PTSD. It was a war. And I had been given responsibility of finding some evidence-based interventions for the traumatized children there. Look, we know that psychological first aid could come first, but also we need to look at trauma-focused CBT, which we used to practice at the child guidance clinic, but it's the individualized treatment, and with so many children at stake, we had to find some group intervention, and so we did. I went and got trained in New York for that. There was one which impressed and remained relevant to us, which was cognitive behavior intervention for trauma in schools, which also has a educator version of it, which is support for students exposed to trauma. Everyone went and learned some EMTR. And our objectives was how to reduce the PTSD symptoms of these children and how to address their anxiety and nervousness, withdrawal and isolation, low mood, acting out in school, and impulsive or risky behavior. And the theory behind these interventions is that thought will influence feelings, will influence behavior. So noticing their thinking and challenging their harmful thoughts and stopping negative problematic thoughts, helping them to relax their body, reduce the anxiety, and helping them to find alternatives for what to do when there's a problem and decide on a plan of action and carry out their desired plan was helpful. So what is the CBITS in detail? It's a skill-based group intervention based on CBT, which involves systemic desensitization, relaxation, exposure, and habituation. And modified SCT is basically skill-based group intervention, which is derived from CBITS, but is being delivered by educators or guidance counselors in the school. And there are 10 group sessions. CBITS has 1 or 2 group sessions for parents and 3 individual sessions for children, where 10 group sessions of similar content are delivered in a lesson format by educators when it comes to SET. And it was originally devised for middle school kids, but it was adapted for young and older kids. And these were evidence-based interventions were shown effectiveness, and we did measure the pre and post using life event scale and depression scale, as well as clinical interview when we did CBITS, as well as when we did the SSET at that time. And the results showed promise in that 60% of males and 40% of females who were in that cohort of 60 children with an average of 10.8 years had exposed to many stressful events. 55% of children admit to 10 to 13 stressful events, while 30% of children exposed to 14 to 15 stressful events in the 17 possible events captured by child PTSD symptom scale, showing very clearly that the trauma secondary to the security incursion was just popular, but they were traumatized before, during, and after the event. And we saw encouraging mean PTSD symptom score before intervention was 25.9, and it reduced to 9.3, which was a significant decrease. And we extended this intervention using community youth facilitators, and we trained the interviewed and CDC endorsed facilitators to learn bounce back intervention, which will bounce back together at that time, and impart it to children in the community in a group setting. And the data compiled showed 39% of youth with significant improvement, 28% some improvement, and there were 33% who showed some decline. It was no wonder, because they were returning to the same household or community and likely to be exposed to similar environment, which in first place could have induced PTSD. So this shows that family and community inclusion was essential. And we did a version of the ESSET where it was different in the sense that we trained 20 teachers in one primary school, for example, to take the activities involved in the training and impart it to the students in the classroom on a daily basis. So it was included as a part of daily classroom activity. Say, for instance, they would um, start with what trauma does to you before the class starts, and they would um, add some breathing before the break and maybe some progressive muscle relaxation after the break, and they will end the class in the evening with a hopeful, positive visualization to go home. And there was significant uh, improvement as evident in the quantitative and qualitative data. And when we checked teachers about 3 months after, 50% of them retained skills taught in the training. And interestingly, some teachers um, who experienced post-traumatic symptoms themselves found some improvement and relief by just practicing these activities in their classroom setting. And we did a focus group after, and it was evident like deep breathing and safe space were applied to non-violent situations like elevating anxiety before examination as well. Teachers express coping benefits from the intervention in their own personal life. So, although there was significant improvement, there was need for continuous training and practice because this is a skill building, and skills can only build over time by repetition and practicing those skills. And if you don't use it over time, you lose it. Then we started hearing the song. All we want to say is that they don't really care about us. And the 40,000 children who might be there with post-traumatic stress and others with varying degrees of symptoms were asking for help, pleading for help, and were stuck by a parent saying, Doc, I don't think nobody will come and help us here. Can you teach us how to help our youth? And I still remember a teacher saying, you come here and talk about traumatized youth. What about us? We are traumatized too. You're going to wait till we go to Bellevue to help us. So our response then was to find a generic version of trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy in group and individual setting and piloting it through school, community, church, and family setting. And we subsumed it into what we call Back Jamaica program. It has 5 sequential parts. And these correspond to the components of foundational prototype, that's trauma-focused CBT model. We have Bounce Back Together and Bounce Back One, which focuses on orientation and engagement, psychoeducation on trauma and reaction to trauma, relaxation, which includes progressive muscle relaxation, deep breathing, positive imagery, identifying feelings and rating those feelings and managing those feelings. Using cognitive skills like thought stopping and thought processing. We have Bounce Back 2, which is a more clinical approach, which includes creating trauma narrative, processing traumatic experiences, mastering trauma reminders in the session setting. And there are some conjoined sessions where they share their trauma narrative with their parents, as well as enhancing future safety and development. We always review goals and graduation. takes place at the end in both of those interventions, where they get a certificate to encourage them, as well as they go home with a workbook with the record of all activities they have practiced during those sessions. And we employed cascade model of training because we don't have enough people to help. So it is training of the training model where we train the teachers, for example, and teachers train the children, or we train the guidance counselor train the teachers, and teachers train the children. And it's a problem-based learning where they work with the real problem facing themselves and the children in the classroom, and provide skills which will help them to cope with it. So, in other words, we would conduct a training on a Friday, for example, and teachers who are trained the Friday intervention will go to their classroom on Monday after revising to a weekend, hopefully, and they will employ those skills in the classroom setting as a part of their everyday classroom activities, make it creative by creating competition, groups, and so on, so that learning takes place in an interactive and more interesting way. And they will come back for the next session on next Friday and share with the trainers how did it go that week with the topic they have learned the previous week, and they will learn the next topic for the next session or next activity for the next session. And the cycle continues till all 6 sessions are complete. And that's what we call Bounce Back Together. Basically involves training of teachers, church and community members to incorporate and expand on components of Bounce Back One into everyday classroom, church, and community activities. So target population obviously is all students at school, church attenders, community members, and it can also be extended to juvenile detention centers and children's homes. Trainees implementers would be all teachers at school, church leaders at church, community leaders, and youth workers recommended by CDCs and interviewed. Background checks are done. And all correctional officers at juvenile detention centers and caregivers in children's home can also be trained in this intervention. And trainers would be the guidance counselors, school, church leaders in churches, community workers trained in BBT and BB1 in the community, and trained clinicians attached to juvenile detention centers and children's home. And those who definitely have been exposed to trauma will go through standalone group interventions where they could select 6 to 8 children as a part of the group and assess their level of PTSD by giving PTSD symptom scale. And if it's very severe, they will be referred to child guidance clinic. But meanwhile, they're waiting, even when they're waiting on the appointment for child guidance clinic, they would go through the 6 sessions of Bounce Back One, where the school guidance counselors or social workers attached to juvenile detention centers will conduct this after being trained by the education officers and trained clinicians. And these trainers will be in turn trained by mental health clinicians trained by Bounce Back Together and Bounce Back One training. And what is Bounce Back Two? It's more a clinical intervention, best delivered by clinicians or select guidance counselor at master's level, and social workers can be also trained in Bounce Back 2 and can, under supervision and support, implement Bounce Back 2. And this is more available for those who have completed bounce back one and have persistent PTS symptoms. As previously, it can be extended to juvenile detention center, child diversion program, and such. And what is extended bounce back? It's additional 6 to 8 sessions of conjoined trauma-focused CBT. And students who have completed bounce back two and have persistent post-traumatic stress symptoms or chronic complex trauma can be referred to child guidance clinics where they will be helped by the trained clinicians from child guidance clinics. And we have children who have trauma and post-traumatic stress, but also are very high risk for violence as well as have more serious emotional behavior disorders. And they will be helped with a 2 year multimodal multi-systemic therapy based on trauma system therapy and multi-systemic therapy for high-risk adolescents. And this is those who have completed bounce back one and two and exhibit severe antisocial behavior. This is implemented concurrently by a team of trained clinicians, case managers, guidance counselors, child diversion, and mental health case workers. And of course, without the help of essential collaborators from Ministry of Health and Wellness, Education, and National Security MOJ, this cannot happen. So then what happens in Bounce Back Together? There are about 6 actions which can be engaged in at any order, although we do it in the systematic way, 1 to 6, while they're being trained. And it includes introduction, overview, consent, um, relaxation, which includes belly breathing, relaxing muscles and visualization, thoughts, feelings, and body sensation action, fear thermometer, coping with thought problems, as well as help them to keep themselves safe, have a circle of safety around them, and be hopeful about their fabulous future. And after 6 sections, there might be a graduation or referral based on what you see is persistent problem. So calling on our willing colleagues, please choose a school, church, and community, and please help to bounce back together. Meanwhile, Challenge and Mental Health Service of Ministry of Health and Wellness, because we have the audacity and willingness to believe that dramatic change is still possible. We want to train and help through clinics, through school, through community, engaging different folks in different agencies, ministries to help children in school, community, and clinic to engage in appropriate level of bounce back interventions to relieve their post-traumatic stress, assess their undiagnosed and untreated mental disorders, and help their parents with the parenting skills and psychosocial support. So it's a schematic, phase-wise intervention, which can be done and effectively we can almost target to help 3,000 children in a span of 12 weeks across the island. And of course, supervision, training, oversight, monitoring, learning, and evaluation should all be a big part of that and will be. It's possible that this whole exercise can be integrated into the model developed by Minister of Education with support from UNICEF in their integrated service delivery handbook. You can see how it can be organized and delivered effectively. But we know what to do, but why we are not doing it is because budgetary restrictions. Yeah, although we're spending so much money in sewing up those who have been shot and stabbed. We are reactive, not proactive. We have job descriptions and workloads, difficulty in task shifting and task sharing. And some people are in it for power and visibility. We are more into competition than collaboration. Although we have common goals, the hidden agendas come in the way. The lack of operational framework that integrates policies and programs, many times it is chronic contemplation versus praxis, commitment, and to resolve to persevere against all odds. Interventions are not aligned with long-term national goals and program, and lack of sustained support across election cycle can hold us back. So if we can just shed the red eyes and transform the bad minds, there is no problem our creativity and ingenuity cannot overcome. So join hands to do whatever we can to safely and effectively to help each other and help prevent Jamaica, our beautiful land of wood and water, from becoming a place of suicide, blood, and slaughter. Thank you.